part 2 that I'm talking about with your quiz was evolution and the understanding of biology. This is SB6a element. So one question was, I think, right off of a quiz that we had, or pretty much word for word. I'm going to take us back to the CK12 biogeography lesson. And here we talk about Darwin's finches. The biogeography of islands yields some evidence for evolution. Consider the birds called finches that Darwin studied on the Galapagos Islands. All of the finches probably descended from one bird that arrived on the island from South America. Until the first bird arrived, there had never been any birds on the island. The bird was a seed eater. It evolved into many different finch species. Each species was adapted for a different type of food. This is an example of adaptive radiation. This is the process by which a single species evolves into many new species to fill available niches. Okay, so when I go here to the question, Darwin wrote many of the premises of the theory of evolution by natural selection by noting the differences in the beaks of closely related finches while studying in the Galapagos. The next question here was something that was not given word for word, which means that this is more of a thinking type question. It's a higher level question. So it does make sense to me that a lot of people ended up getting this one wrong. I think 22% of y'all got this one right, and I can understand that. Okay, scientists theorized that Australia was once a part of a larger mainland due to plate tectonics broke away. According to island theory, scientists can explain all but one of these occurrences as a result of Australia becoming and staying an island for a very long time. So again, we're going to go through each one of these statements and see is this a true or false statement, and we're going to pick the one that's false. So first of all, can an island give you extremes in sizes, either large or small? So if we look back here to biogeography, the biogeography reading that we had, yes, Darwin's finches were examples. We had adaptive radiation, which is going to give us all kinds of different organisms. And island biogeography, remember, this is when you have something that was not there, like, we probably had no birds on the island. And then when that first bird arrived, different birds were successful on different islands based on what the food availability was. Okay, so we got to understand that the food availability was there as we're reading this question. The what wasn't there originally were the finches until they were introduced, and this could go along with other, any other species that we're talking about. So this is a true statement. Extreme in size, large or small. That's true. You can get that. Okay, the evolution of flightless birds. That could be possible because, again, we start out with one species of bird, and then depending on the availability of food and resources in that island, different birds will become more successful and produce. So that could be a true statement. All right, the presence of relics like marsupials. So that does make sense. And when we think about it, again, this is a thinking question. This is not word for word. So, I can understand that a lot of people had trouble with this. In North America, we have one marsupial, and that is the opossum. Now, it is related to other marsupials in Australia, and a marsupial is something that takes the little growing baby and it keeps it inside its pouch, feeds it until it's old enough to, get out of the pouch and do something like a kangaroo. And the only marsupial that we have on North America are opossums. So, like, for example, if there's a dead opossum on the side of the road, sometimes if it has been freshly run over, the baby opossums are still inside of that mother possum that got run over and can be rescued. All right, so this is possible. You could have the presence of relics. So like when Australia split apart from, this continent, the opossums maybe just were on this side of the split and stayed on our part of the mainland, and Australia, you know, that's why we don't have the kangaroos and stuff, because they weren't on that side of the split. All right, so that could be a true statement. All right, a large assortment of plant dispersal mechanisms. All right, this is where we have to remember that on the case of the islands, the plants were already there. The seeds were being dispersed by something, and the plants weren't introduced to the island. What was introduced to the island were, the other organisms. And so that one is going to be the false statement or the correct answer for this. All right, and I get that this one was hard for you. Totally understand that. Next question. This one we've had in so many different forms. We did the modeling activity, the scaling activity, where we took the scale of the earth, and we keep having the question about when would a human appear if this were a calendar, and the human would appear on the very last day of the year, like right before midnight. So we've had this many times. It's written in the notebook along with that calendar scale down of geologic time. It is also in this history of the earth, where the earth was originated. Evidence shows about 4.5 4.6 billion years ago. So the only logical answer here, it can't be 4 trillion years ago, because the earth is said to be about 4.5 to 4.6 billion years ago. So 4 billion years is going to be the correct answer on this one. Okay, next question. Before organisms with nuclei evolved, life on Earth consisted of only unicellular what? All right, unicellular prokaryotes. Remember, this is from like the very first day in class. We talked about the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes, yet only 78% got it right. That means there's still 22%, 22% out there, they're not getting this right. So we really want to go back to the difference between prokaryotes and eukaryotes. And again, prokaryotic cells do not have that nucleus that contain DNA. All right, they do have DNA, but they do not have a nucleus in which they're contained. They do not have membrane-bound organelles. They were among the first organisms to evolve and are still among the most common organisms today. So this was a level 1 question. It was said word for word, and it's also been repeated over and over and over throughout our time in class. The next question, I can understand why people didn't get this. About 31% of y'all got this correct. Okay, and I can understand why you didn't get it. The reason why you didn't get it is because we don't often, and we did not really focus on the oxygen spikes. We talked about the formation of oxygen and how that changed our geologic timeline, and how that made room for more complex organisms to be formed. So that's what we talked about in class. Now, on the reading, so I can understand why a lot of y'all didn't get this one, but if we look back to the history of the Earth, the second oxygen spike occurred between 550 and 542 million years ago. So if you happen to write down that history of the Earth, which I think that we have this as a part of the scaling activity that we did, I think that you've got this here. That corresponds to this portion of our time scale. And this is the Cambrian Explosion. The correct answer for this is that it's going to be when life came to land. So if we relate that back to the timeline activity that we did, that is that little picture of life moving, the race to the land. I think that's the little picture where it shows life racing to get on the land first. So I get why you had trouble with that one. But the correct answer here is A, life to land. Number 37. Oops, let me try to go back. The rearrangement of large land masses due to blank has added to the diversity of the earth. As a species splits apart, they begin to change due to the process of natural selection. After a period of time, two groups become anatomically and genetically what? All right, so the land mass is splitting apart. That is going to be continental drift. And so it's going to be one of these two choices. And then as they are split apart, we're going to see that they're going to become more different than each other. So the answer right here is B, continental drift and different. If we go back to biogeography, we can see where it discusses how this worked with the dromedary camel, Bactrian camel, and the llama. So as these land masses split apart, we have these different, more genetically and anatomically diverse organisms that are closely related. Okay, this one right here. We're looking for one word that fits in this, and I was just like screaming, only 66% of y'all got this right. And I have, as a biology teacher, we really harp on the importance of using this word correctly. Okay, this word is a predictive word, meaning that, for example, the germ theory, the cell theory, the theory of relativity, the theory of gravity, we can predict based on that theory things that are going to happen. All right, so theory is something it's going to be very reliable. For scientists, a theory has an important meaning. A theory is a well-substantiated explanation of an aspect of the natural world that can incorporate laws, hypotheses, and facts. So, first of all, even if you would have read that first sentence, laws, hypothesis, facts, these two could have been eliminated because these two are listed up here. The word we're looking for incorporates those. The blank of gravitation for existence explains why apples fall from trees and astronauts float in space. Similarly, the theory of evolution explains why so many plants and animals, some very similar and some very different, exist on Earth now and in the past, as revealed by the fossil record. A theory not only explains known facts, but it also allows scientists to make predictions of what they would observe if that theory is true. Scientific theories are testable. New evidence should be compatible with a theory. If it isn't, the theory is refined or rejected. The longer the central elements of a theory hold, the more observations it predicts, the more tests it passes, the more facts it explains, the stronger the theory. All right. So number one, just by elimination, you should have been able to also eliminate the word prediction here, because it's saying that wouldn't make any sense. The longer the central elements of a prediction hold, the more observations it predicts, that wouldn't make any sense. So just by elimination, you should have come up with theory if you couldn't remember it. But we watched a video at the beginning of class about theories versus laws versus observations. And we have written this and talked about this over and over again. So I was like, why did only 66% of y'all get that question correct? Remember, theory is a very important word in biology and science.